Good morning, Boker Tov. Welcome back to Parsha Perspectives for today. Thank you so much for being here on Erev Pesach. Wasn't sure we were going to have a shir, but I'm glad you turned up. Be a little awkward if I were sitting by myself. Parsha series is generously sponsored by Becky and Avi Katz and family in memory of Becky's father, David Grossman. Our learning is Leili Nishmas David Ben Menachem Manish. This morning is our last shir until after Pesach. We'll resume Mirz Hashem, God willing, on April 29th, towards the end of April. Wishing everyone a Chag Kasher V'Sameach. This morning, we have the privilege of learning Parsha's Tzav, page 568 in the Art Scroll Stone Chumash. Hashem speaks to Moshe, saying, Tzav es Aaron v'ezbanav le'mor, command Aaron and his sons, saying, Zos Torah Sa'ola hi ola al-mukdam mizbeach kol alayla ar-boker ve'eish ha-mizbeach tukad bo. We're continuing the karbanos, continuing the direction towards the Kohanim. Sefer Vayikra is Torah's Kohanim. This is the Sefer really directed to the priests, to the Kohanim. It is their guidebook, how to offer the sacrifices in the Beis Hamikdash. There's sacrifices that at first seem archaic and arcane and outdated and barbaric, but one understands the deep symbolism, the deep meaning of each of the karbanos, they remain highly and incredibly relevant still today. They're not outdated, they're not archaic or barbaric, they weren't just a concession for their time, but there's deep meaning in the idea of taking the animal in us. Each of us is composed of an animal and a godly soul. We're speaking about this now Wednesday mornings in our new Tanya Shir. We have the godly element, the chelak alaka mimal mamish, a piece of God literally endowed, embedded inside each and every one of us. We are an expression, an extension, a manifestation of godliness, but He created us with an animal instinct, an animal soul, that animal indulgence, animal desire, animal impulse. And it's that battle, that war that happens between the two. When we bring a korban, the way we draw close, the way we become karov to Hashem, is to slaughter that animal inside us and to give expression, to hopefully fulfill the potential of that godly soul. And as we've spoken about many times, that is each of the laws, each of the details of minutiae, from burning the fats to sprinkling the blood to the flour, they're all related to different components of who we are and that message, what we're trying to get across and what we're trying to communicate therein. Where did I put my... here. So let's start with a Tiferet Shmuel. Let's start with Shmuel Berenbaum. Rashi famously says, Tzav es Aaron. We've seen this many times before. Ein Tzav, command. Hashem tells Moshe, command Aaron and his sons, saying, normally we have Vayomer, Vayidaber, to say, and here we have Tzav. Tzav is a very strong language, command. Says Rashi, Ein Tzav elashon ziruz miyad uladoros. That harsh and strong language, that very, very powerful language, Tzav, to command, means ziruz. Ziruz means alacrity, zeal, enthusiasm. Miyad, immediately, don't delay, don't procrastinate. Uladoros, and in perpetuity. Do it intergenerationally, do it forever. So why do we need that here specifically? Lashon ziruz miyad uladoros. Why do we need to be reminded? Aaron and his sons here, as opposed to what? All of last week's Parsha? As opposed to everything else instructed incumbent upon them? This specifically, what we're about to read and learn, this has to be the extra chizuk, the extra support. Do it with alacrity and zeal. Do it immediately. Don't delay. Don't wait. And do it for generations. You know why? Because here the Kohanim are asked to put out, to spend money, and to get nothing in return. There's a loss. There's a loss. What's that loss? So the simple understanding of this Rashi is that the Korban Ola, which this pasuk is referring to, the Korban Ola is offered on the Mizbeach, and what happens to it? It's entirely consumed. All of it burns on the fire, on the altar. The Kohanim don't walk away with anything. There's no barbecue, there's no steak, there's no dinner, there's nothing. There's chesron kiss. They're taking time off from work, they're showing up, they're doing the service, they're breaking their back, and what do they get for it? Not even a free meal, not even dinner. They get nothing. So since there's a chesron kiss, since it costs them something, their time, their energy, and they get nothing in return, so people generally, when you know you're getting something out of it, you show up, you're excited about it. But if you feel I have to extend or sacrifice or compromise or pay, and I get nothing in exchange, nothing in return, it needs a little bit of enthusiasm. It needs a chizuk. And that's why it's the language of tzav, to command. Says Rav Shmuel Berenbaum Tiferet Shmuel, Yesh le'zor mikan al zihiros mechemdas hamamon. You see from here the powerful influence of the drive and the desire for money. Who are we talking about here? Who are we talking about? We're talking about Aaron, the great Aaron, the original OG Kohen Gadol, Talking about Aaron, the brother of Moshe. We're talking about Aaron who's on such a incredibly high level, such a holy Yid. And one might think that somebody who's immersed all day in the service of Hashem, you're running, you're operating, you're serving in the Beis HaMikdash, certainly you'll be protected from that drive, that desire. You know who has greed? People who work on Wall Street, people who work in finance, brokers. That's who's greedy. People who are regulating tariffs, people who are trying to save themselves from the plummet of the stock market. There's chemdas mammon. There people are worried about and are driven by a desire for money. But Aaron HaKohen, he's a holy Yid, and he works in and serves in the holiest place on earth. Surely and certainly he'll be protected from chemdas mammon, right? Wrong. This is his mission, this is his purpose. Certainly he won't be filled with greed or a drive for money. And nevertheless, even the great Aaron, and even in the great Beis HaMikdash, and even in the great service of Hashem, nobody is not vulnerable to the power and the influence and the drive and the desire and the temptation for money. There have been scandals, tragically, terribly, Baruch Hashem, not in our community or our shul, but there's scandals. People who work in shuls, and they were stealing, they were cheating, they were taking from the coffers, from the discretionary fund, from the shul budget. They were pocketing, they were lying, they were manipulating, they were cooking the books, they were skimming off the top, they were taking. You'll say, how could it be? Holy organizations, holy people, you come to shul every day and you're working in the holy shul and Mikdash Ma'at? And the answer is, such is the power of the drive for money. No one is immune. No one is not vulnerable. No one is protected. And that's what the Torah is communicating, even in Aaron and even the Kohanim, because there's chesron kis, because there's a potential loss, therefore no one's immune. This is why in the world of kashrus, we have such strict standards, because once you introduce money, kesef ya'aver einei tzadikim, money blinds us, money distorts us, money clouds our judgment, and money compromises and corrupts otherwise incredibly good people of holiness and integrity. You know, there was a big push many months ago. A lot of poskim, gedolim, great rabbis of our time, co-signed a letter saying this proliferation, what's become very popular, again, thank God, not in our community, I would say yet, but hopefully not ever, which is people who are cooking at home and selling, running businesses out of their home without any kosher supervision. In many communities, that's becoming very popular, but it's wrong. Even in people whose home I would eat if they invite me for a Shabbos meal as a guest, I would never buy, because once you introduce money, the temptation, the desire, the ability to cut corners, the ability to replace ingredients, the ability to justify and rationalize, once you introduce money and profit margins and expenses, it clouds judgment. No one is immune. We don't trust anybody. Look at Aaron and his vulnerability in the Beis HaMikdash itself. And communities should take a stand. Shuls themselves certainly, but organizations and also individuals don't buy from home businesses that don't have hashgacha. Aside from the fact that it's not fair, why should other caterers and businesses and stores have to pay for hashgacha, have to meet health regulations and standards, and someone's just going to cook out of their kitchen? It doesn't matter how holy and how righteous, how many times they say Tehillim, how tznius they dress. It doesn't matter. I would eat in their home if invited as a guest, but I would never buy or eat food that was purchased from such a person that doesn't have supervision. How often and how many times do we have to have scandals in communities across the country and the world where even very righteous and very holy-looking people were replacing ingredients? And every community has had, even under the greatest and tightest supervisions. So certainly when there's no supervision, people cannot assume to be trusted. And you see that that's what our Parsha is trying to tell us. The great Aaron HaKohen in the Mishkan, in the Beis HaMikdash, certainly in our lives. Says Rav Shul Berenbaum, you see in the Torah just how pervasive the desire for money is. Cain and Hevel, the two sons of Adam, were fighting over the division of the land. The Medrash tells us, one took all the land, and one took all the assets, all the movable property. One said, the land you're standing on, it's mine. I get all the property. And the other said, the clothing you're wearing and all that you have, it's mine. I get all the assets. Din amar chalatz v'din amar parach. V'toch kach vayakam kain al hevel achiv vayahargehu. What led to the very first murder? A fight and a battle over things, over property, over money, over assets. These two brothers were the total population of the world. They could divide the entire world between the two of them. They had everything, and yet it wasn't enough. When people fight, when they want, when money is in the picture, when one taps into greed, we have the very first murder. Who would be on top? Who would be the wealthiest? Who would control the other? Who would have more? In that race to the finish, race to the top, in that desire and drive for more, insatiable appetite, we have murder. Why? Why Chazal tell us, did Ham run to sterilize his father Noach? Because he said, if our father has more children, it's more people to divide the inheritance. I don't want to divide it further. That means less for me. Again, we're talking about a tiny population. You have the entire world is yours. You're so worried about dividing it, but you see, when you introduce greed, you remove logic. When you introduce greed, you remove judgment. You see this also with Stom. Binyane Mamanos. Anshe Stom Roim V'chatam Lashem. Rashis Hayiram Beguf V'chatam Be'mamonam. Lo Talach L'Sham K'Akulo Mashke Ayilam Oshirav. Stom had tremendous wealth, and yet they were cruel to guests. It was illegal in Stom to offer hospitality, because what ruled the day in Stom was greed. And he has a long essay here and goes on and on about this idea about greed and the pernicious influence of greed, and that no one is immune from it. And you see that even by Aaron. And that's what the Torah is telling us here in the beginning. Tzav es Aaron ve'es banav lemor. Why the language of Tzav? An unusual language. Command, strong. Why? Because Lashon Ziros miyad ladoros. Because once you introduce chisaron kiss, once someone stands to lose something, all of a sudden now, I see this all the time. People build, they knock down, they build a new home. Baruch Hashem, more power to them. Tavo aleim bracha. They should use it in good health and in happiness. And to knock down and build a home is a very, very expensive endeavor, an enterprise. And as a rabbi, I'm one of the first to see it. You know why? Not because they call me over to have al-chaim, which is very nice, and I would come, but because they want to know, where do I put the mezuzahs? How many mezuzahs do I need? And we walk around and we count all the bedrooms and all the doorposts and all the doorways. And the designer put 17 archways in the front and in the back. They didn't realize that every archway would need its own mezuzah. And they didn't realize that all the pillars throughout the entire house create doorposts and door frames that need mezuzahs. And by the time you're done with the walkthrough of the house and you've calculated 67 mezuzahs, 72 mezuzahs, all of a sudden they say, whoa, 1 second, that wasn't a line item in my budget. So Rabbi, it's okay if I buy the cheap mezuzahs, right? I can get away with the $75, $100 mezuzahs. I don't need the $250, $300 mezuzahs, right? Right? So I always say to them, let's look at the car in your driveway. Let's look at the quality of the appliances in your kitchen. Let's look at the craftsmanship around this new house. If you got away with the most inexpensive, if you on yourself spend the least, then when it comes to your religious ritual life, then get away with the least. But let's open up your closet. Let's look at the brand of the shoes sitting in your wife's closet. Let's see, what are you buying and where do you buy it? And if there you're not getting away with the least, the generic, the lowest level, then when it comes to mezuzah, you can't either. But what happens? Chisaron kiss. I didn't budget it. It wasn't a line item. I wasn't expecting to spend it. Do I really have to? Because the mezuzah is all wrapped up and it's rolled up and it's covered and it's in a case and no one gets to see which version you bought. And there's a chisaron kiss or attempted, what's the least expensive one? Give me that one. But that's the area of our life we should say, give me the most muhuder. Give me the most expensive. Give me the most beautiful and the nicest. Give me the one that will offer the greatest protection to my family. I want the nicest mezuzah on the doorposts of my home. But Elamai, what do you see? Once you introduce chisaron kiss, once you introduce the idea that there's a loss, greed, money, all of a sudden our judgment is clouded. We see things upside down. We make mistakes. And it's not only because we're lowly. We shouldn't feel inadequate. And we shouldn't sit in judgment of ourselves. Who himself was vulnerable to this? None other than Aaron HaKohen. Tzav as Aaron v'es Bonav. Now, Rav Shaul Alter Shlita, the Ger Rosh Hashiva, in his wonderful sefer and wonderful svarim that I love, in Kedusha Rabbah, he says the following: the reference to financial loss in our pasuk seems to refer to the Korban Olah. That's what we're talking about. Why? Because it's all consumed, it's all burnt on the Mizbeach, on the altar. And the Kohanim don't get to walk away with anything. No dinner, no meat, no leftovers, no barbecue. And so there's a special need for Zrizas, but to say for Aaron Edus, Rav Shraga Yair Bial, the grandson of the Yehudi HaKadosh, the Yid HaKadosh. So the Aaron Edus questions this understanding. Why? Because if you're reading carefully, fast forward, Perek Zayin Pasuk Ches, and there the Torah says, "Va'kohen ha'makrib es ha'olah sa'ish, or ha'olah asher hikriv l'kohen lo yihiyeh." The Kohen who offers a person's olah, the hide of the olah that he offered shall belong to that Kohen, it shall be his. So you see, the Kohanim do get something. You're right, they don't walk away with meat, with flesh. They can't make a barbecue. But what do they walk away with? New leather jacket, new leather shoes, new leather belt, new leather couch. They walk away with the hide. That's theirs, that they get to keep. That's how the Gemara in Pesachim Daf Nun Zayin derives, darshans. So why would a Korban Olah be considered a financial loss to the Kohen? There's a chisaron kiss, there's a financial loss. They need extra zrizas. They need extra chizuk. There is no financial loss. They do get to walk away with something. What do they walk away with? Fregs ask the Aron HaEdus. They walk away with the hide, the leather. That has value. So the Aron HaEdus therefore suggests Chazal were not referring to the Korban Olah. What were they referring to? What's coming up next? These are the laws of the Olah. And the Olah sits al Mogda al Mizbeach kol alayla ad aboker. It sits on the altar, burning and being consumed by fire the entire night until the morning. The Isha Mizbeach to Kadbo, and the light, the fire of the Mizbeach burns it. And then the Kohen changes his clothing in order to do what? Take out the garbage. Trumas Hadeshin. To take out the garbage. Says the Aron Edus, that's what we're referring to. Trumas Hadeshin. The avoda of removing ashes from the Mizbeach, which is discussed and comes up in the following pasuk. So since this provided no material benefit at all to the Kohen, he needed a special prodding of alacrity. You see, when you're asked in your home, could you go out and do the shopping? You say, okay, I'll go buy the ingredients. At least I'm getting dinner out of this. I'm getting a Shabbos or a Yontif meal out of it. But when you're told, could you take the garbage out? All you get are smelly hands. What do you get out of it? You get nothing. So the Kohanim are given this task, they're given this job. Don't forget to take out the garbage, and there's no benefit. They get nothing. Chisar and kiss, it's effort. They smell, they're sweaty. Other Mefarshim add that Trumas Hadeshin would actually cause the Kohen a loss, because the Gemara says the Kohanim would not wear their regular big day kahuna. We'll see in a moment Rashi, when they would do the Trumas Hadeshin. Why? If they wore their regular big day kahuna, when you take out the garbage, what happens? If you surround yourself like garbage, you smell like garbage. The garbage drips on you, and then you get covered in the garbage. So they would change out of the regular big day kahuna. And their wear and tear on their clothing was the loss that they would have to incur. So we're not talking about the Torah, the Korban Olah, says the Aron Edus. We're talking about the Trumas. We're talking about the Trumas Hadeshin. Talking about the Trumas Hadeshin. And says Rav Shaul Alter, expanding on this, you see from the perspective of Avodas Hashem that when we incur a loss in a context that can be likened to Trumas Hadeshin, when we rid ourselves of our surroundings of negative influences, do we need a reminder? We reminder of Zrizus. It's not always finances at stake. When we seek to illuminate the world with Hashem's glory, we need to willingly give of ourselves, of our comforts and routines, and we do it with Zrizus. When we take out the garbage of our lives, delete the apps on our phone that are wasting our time, distracting us, causing us to look at things we shouldn't. When we take out the garbage, the Trumas Hadeshin of our lives, then we have to do it with Zrizus Miyad Uladoros. That's the message of the Aron Edus. Not only the Korban Olah, we're referring here to the Trumas Hadeshin. And when we take out the Deshin, when we take out the garbage of our lives, when we eliminate and remove the excess, the garbage, the things that are bringing us down in our lives, don't wait, don't procrastinate, don't delay, because we don't want to take out the garbage of our lives. We enjoy the garbage of our lives. It's enjoyable. But when we want to take out, delete, eliminate, purge the garbage of our lives, Tzav, Lashon Zrizas. We got to do it with alacrity, with zeal, with enthusiasm. Miyad, do it immediately. Uladoros, and send that message to intergenerations. Perak Vav Pasuk Gimel, moving right along. Torah tells us first Pasuk Beis that, Pasuk Gimel. The Kohen should put on his linen garment, and he puts on the linen breeches on his flesh, and he should separate the ash of what the fire consumed of the elevation offering in the altar, and put it next to the altar. So he changes his clothing, and he removes what had been burning on the altar all night. What's left is a pile of ash, and he takes that ash and he places it next to the Mizbeach, and then he removes his garments and he puts on other garments, and then he takes it outside the camp to a pure place, which is a very inefficient way to take out the garbage. First, you put the garbage down next to the altar, and then you take it out, and you finish taking it out all the way at the dump, all the way at the street where it'll be picked up. Why not just take it immediately? Why is there a stop, an intermission? Why on the way do you put it down, then change, then finish taking it out? We've shared before, but I'll repeat. I can't help but repeat because it's one of my favorites, because my buddy Ben tells me it's okay to repeat. So why do you take it out, and why do you stop, and why do you put it next to the altar? It's a very powerful message. Pesach's coming up. I used this one year for the Yizkor Drasha. And the message is this. I believe it's the Tzav who says, you know why? Because the sacrifice you'll bring today, you should not ever feel or think that today and you are the first to ever make a sacrifice. The sacrifice of today is built on and rests on the sacrifice of yesterday. So you take out the desh and the ash, the sacrifice of yesterday, and you put it next to the altar before you bring your sacrifice of today. Before we work, before we live our avodas Hashem, before we think about our expense of matzah and wine and grape juice and yeshiva and day school, before we think about the days off we have to take from work, before we think about the sacrifices we have to make to be a yid, first we look at the sacrifice of yesterday and recognize and realize the sacrifice of today is built on the sacrifice of yesterday. Midovad. Now Rashi on these words, midovad, says the following. Rashi says the following. Midovad, v'lavash kohen midovad, hiaksonas, matamad lomer mido, shetehei kimidaso. That his clothing, the Kohen's clothing, should fit him properly. Now the Kohen might be tempted, borrow some other Kohen's garment. Or maybe he wants to save money on the tailoring of his garment, so he's not going to tailor his garment. So Rashi tells us that midovad, it should fit him. This long shirt, midovad, should fit him. It should be measured. Mido, it's from the language of madad, to measure, that the shirt has to be fitted to the size of the individual Kohen. Now, I think there's a very powerful message in this. The Rambam writes that a Talmid Chacham, and really everyone who aspires to be, someone who wants to be a righteous person, live a righteous life, can't and shouldn't look like a shlump. Don't look like a shlump. Be put together. Talmid Chacham who has a stain on their garment is a chilul Hashem. You have to be put together. I was raised, happens to be one of my father's pet peeves, one of my father's hang-ups. I was raised that if you're wearing a tie, button your top button and put the tie to the top. Now, if you come home, Shabbos lunch, you open it, you're enjoying a little bit, fine. But when you go into a business meeting, when you go into shul to daven, when you're giving a shiur or a lecture, when you're interacting and engaged with others, why do many people not? It's yeshivish, it's chaimish, you leave the tie all the way open, the button all the way open. Why most people? They enjoyed a little too much of Kiddush, and the top button doesn't necessarily close anymore. So you see Rashi says, midovad, midaso. A yid, if you aspire to be a Talmid Chacham, you want to be a Kiddush Hashem, get clothing that fits you. It's time for a new shirt, or lose a few pounds. But have a shirt that you can close the top button. It should be fitted, shouldn't be baggy, shouldn't look like a schlump, shouldn't be falling apart, shouldn't be a mess. You shouldn't be a mess. You should look put together. You should look put together and be put together. So you'll say, since when does the Torah care about vanity? Since when does the Torah care about beauty and aesthetics? Why should it be a red flag if the boy picks you up for a shidduch date and he's a schlump and he's a mess and his clothing is too baggy and it doesn't even fit? And if he's wearing a tie, he can't close it to the top or close the top button. Why should that bother you? What's inside is what matters. What we care about is the holy neshama, the chiluk alakom imal mamish. Who cares about the vanity? You see, the Kohen, the chavur tifaras, the whole big day kahuna are about bringing dignity and elevating the experience. In our lives, we are the mamlechas kohanim. We're meant to be a mamlechas kohanim. We're meant to be a nation of kohanim. So particularly those who sit in Steig, who learn Torah and live Torah, we are the kohanim, we are the priests, we are the teachers, we are the role models of the world. You can't be stained. Your shoulders shouldn't be covered with dandruff. Your jacket shouldn't be wrinkled and crumpled in a ball. Your button on the top should be able to close and your tie should be closed to the top. These are basics that we've lost today. Dignity. Slobodka. You know what I'm talking about. Rabbi Tights, my mother says growing up in Rabbi Tights' home, she never ever saw him without his frock. She never just saw him wearing a shirt. If you learned in Slobodka, godless ha'adam, the Slobodka yeshiva, the altar of Slobodka, had a tailor on staff in the yeshiva. The boys didn't have 15 suits in the closet. You had one suit. It lasted you the whole Zman, till the next Pesach. If there was enough money, he bought you another. And often a button would pop off. So there was a tailor on staff. You know why? Because the altar wouldn't let a boy in the Beis Medrash if he was missing a button. If you're missing a button, how could you come in the Beis Medrash? Mamlachas kohanim, midovad. It's got to fit you. It's got to be proper. It's got to be fitted. It's got to be dignified. It's got to be elevated. You got to look put together. You're baggy, you're wrinkled, you're covered in dandruff, your top button doesn't button, your tie doesn't tie. What are you doing? Mamlachas kohanim. Talmud Chacham, the Rambam says, has to make a Kiddush Hashem. So it's not vanity, it's part of the way we make an impression in this world. L'maisa, the reality is that we have a guf, we have a body, and the way others perceive us will elevate our Yiddishkeit. This is an avoda. We're doing the avoda of avodas Hashem. We are the Mamlachas kohanim. So Rashi here says it's not vanity at all. My father's right, his pet peeve and his hang-up, which is get a shirt that fits you so the top button can close, and close the tie all the way to the top. You should look like a mensch when you're giving a shir, a dvar Torah, when you're coming to a meeting, when you're coming into shul to daven. And you shouldn't be covered in dandruff and stains and baggy and unfitted. This is a Rashi. It's not my father. It's a Rashi. My father surely knows the Rashi. But I want to share with you a Turei Tzav. The Rach Meshivka, the Maros Torah says, what's true physically is also true spiritually. Ma tamad lomar mido shetei kemidaso. Your pants shouldn't be too short, and your pants shouldn't be too long. They should fit you just right. They should fit. Now, how do you define what's fitting? The younger generation are wearing pants so tight you need a crowbar in order to get in order to get out. Nebuch, I try to go shopping for suits these days. I'm not trying to compete with the teenagers to wear so tight that the circulation in your legs is cut off. You can't even breathe anymore. So how do you decide what fits you? What fits you? What a 17-year-old will say is fitting, a 65-year-old will say is not, and so on and so forth. So it means what's normal, what's reasonable, what makes a person look put together. Shouldn't be too long, shouldn't be too short, shouldn't be too tight, shouldn't be too loose, it should be just right. So what's true physically, ha'adam tzarech le'isnaig ba'avodas Hashem kimidaso, k'sheyora b'chinaso midregaso shelo yinas le'isnaig b'midas gvos asherim l'mayla mimadregaso. Says the holy Rach Meshivka, according to Turei Tzav, what's true physically, that your clothing has to fit, your Yiddishkeit has to fit. Your Yiddishkeit has to fit. Don't aspire and don't reach and don't be acting and conducting stringencies and chumras and a life and a lifestyle that doesn't fit you. You're not up to that. You're not there yet. You don't have the knowledge. You don't have the learning. That's not who you are. Yes, we're all bound by halacha. It doesn't mean within Jewish law, pick and choose. But it means in conduct, in dress, in where we're at. There was a point last year, 2 years ago, I get in trouble for this, but I was considering putting on a gartel, maybe just on Shabbos, maybe during the week, enhancing, elevating the davening, feeling. Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson describes that when you put on a gartel, it's like buckling the seatbelt. Just like pull out of the driveway. Before you start driving, you buckle on the seatbelt. Now you know I'm about to drive. So the gartel, you buckle up. We're about to drive. We're about to daven. So I asked Charlotte, I asked the Ger Rosh Hashiva, I said, Rebbe, I'm thinking about it. What does the Rav think? What does the Rosh Hashiva think? So he said to me, why don't you wear a gartel b'pnimius for a month? Put on a gartel inside. The whole idea of the gartel is it separates your upper half and your lower half, your heart from your erva, and a person should strive for kedusha, and your godly soul from your animal soul. So do it internally. Before you daven, put on the virtual gartel. Think about it. Remember to put it on virtually. Remember to put it on metaphorically. And if you can remember to do that for a month, and you're moved and transformed by it for a month, then come back to me, then you can talk about putting it on. I haven't succeeded yet for a month straight, so I'm not wearing it. What was he telling me? It's got to fit. It's got to fit. If that's not your upbringing, that's not your family's minhag, that's not where you come from, that's not what you're up to, it's not where you're at, that's not what you're doing, so it's got to fit. It's got to fit. And that's what Rashi's saying. Just like the Kohen had to wear midovad, shitehekim midaso, it's got to fit you, it's got to fit properly. So what's true physically in terms of the clothing we wear, it's got to fit physically, is also true spiritually, our Yiddishkeit. the Torah, our practices, our garb, it's got to fit. It's got to fit. It shouldn't be too high. It shouldn't be too high. And it also shouldn't be too short. You can't wear pants that are too short. You shouldn't wear that doesn't fit you because it's too small. So also, don't underachieve. Don't undersell yourself. Don't not do things that are becoming that you should be doing. Don't do too much. Don't do too little. Just like the three bears, you got to get it just right. With that exact midah should be your avodas Hashem. Perek Vav, Pasuk Daled. We're flying today. Everyone buckled in. Speaking of seatbelts, and the Kohen puts on other clothing, and he brings the garbage outside the machaneh el makom tahor, to a proper place. And this is a holy avoda. The Kohen taking out the garbage is part of the avoda. Don't think that you're so big and you're so great and so superior and so exalted and so prominent and so prestigious. Don't forget. I've told the story before. I love to tell this story. I was invited previously, not because of me, but because we live in a swing district and we decide presidents. I was invited to a series of meetings at the White House. And I remember the first time I went and I was so excited and I was so geared up and I thought about exactly what I would say in the encounter with the president. I won't even say which administration or when this was. And when it was over, second I walked out, I called my wife and I was telling her all about it and the conversation, how I spoke up, what we accomplished, what we achieved. And she said, "That's amazing. That's lovely. I'm so proud of you. That's great. Don't forget tomorrow's garbage day when you get home at midnight. Don't forget when you get in at 2 a.m. from that flight, from your big fancy trip to Washington, in your fancy suit with your fancy briefcase, don't forget to bring the garbage to the edge of the driveway because tomorrow's garbage day. Don't forget. That's the avoda of the Trumas Hadeshen. Don't forget. Taking out the garbage is also is avoda. It's a holy. Your wife asks. It's a responsibility to the family. It's living with dignity so your house doesn't smell and stink. It's also an avoda. It's also part of the avoda. And one shouldn't look down or be resentful or regret or think it's not for me. There's a story of a Rosh Yeshiva. The story, I don't think I told this one before, but there was a story of a Kol Younger Man. There was a young man learning in Kollel, and there were some Shalom Bayis problems happening. So they met with the Rebbe. With the Rosh Yeshiva. She said, "No, what's the problem? What's going on? Why is there tension? What's happening in the marriage?" She said, "I need help at home. I got my hands full. There's a lot going on. He won't take out the garbage." He says, "I should take out the garbage? I learn Torah day and night. I'm an aspiring, budding Talmid Chacham. I'm a Kol Younger Man. It's pasnish. I'm going to take garbage out. I'm going to be seen schlepping in both hands, carrying garbage bags, leaking and dripping, and walking to the garbage. And it's not for me. It's not for me." Shiva listened. He heard. He counseled them. He advised them. He gave them chizik. Fine. The next morning, early in the morning, before heading out to shul, this Kol Younger Man, this young man comes out of his house and he finds his Rebbe, his Rosh Yeshiva, schlepping the garbage out. So Rebbe, what are you doing? What are you doing with my garbage? He said, "I heard you. You were right. It's beneath you. You learn Torah all day. So I came to help your wife because she needs help. So I came to take out the garbage for her." And the message was received. The more Torah you learn should not mean that you're less. You should be taking out the garbage. To all the Kollel guys who are home for Pesach, if you're watching or listening, to all the Bachrim who've been learning Shtark who are home for Pesach, sitting and steiging doesn't mean you don't take out the garbage. I don't care if you're sitting at the dining room table and you're watching your mother or mother-in-law, or for that matter, your father or father-in-law, less likely. But schlepping the garbage, get up from the sefer, jump up, take it from their hand, and take it out. Azay is the Trumas Hadeshen. What's the Torah? If you could be learning Torah that makes you ignore and neglect and not even see your mother-in-law on Erev Pesach schlepping garbage or bringing in the groceries for the next round of meals she's making for you, then what's the value of that Torah that you're learning? Get up, close the sefer for a moment, and go take out the garbage. And go bring in the groceries. That's what the Torah is really all. That's what the Torah is really all about. So there's an avodah of Trumas Hadeshen. There was special clothing of the Trumas Hadeshen. This isn't low or inferior or beneath or pasnish of the Kohen. This is the avodah of the Kohen, and this is what it's about. And this is what it's about for this time of year. Says the Tiferes Shmuel. Says the holy Rosh Yeshiva of Shmuel Berenbaum. Quotes Rashi. Ein zu chovel al derech eretz. Why did the Kohen take off his clothing? The Kohen has certain big day kahuna, l'chavar l'sefaris. He wears it for dignity and he elevates the whole avoda. And yet he takes off the big day kahuna to take out the garbage. Says Rashi, there's no obligation to remove it. It's derech eretz. Because he has his normal uniform he wears for the avoda in the Mishkan. And if you're going to take the garbage out in it, it's going to get dirty. And that's disrespectful. The clothing you use gives a mushal. Rashi then gives a parable. The chef wears an apron, but when he goes to now serve, he takes off the apron. So you wear an apron because you don't want to get dirty and soiled, but you take off what got dirty and soiled when it's time to serve because that's disrespectful. Says the Tifer Shmuel. The key here is don't serve Hashem just like the person serving the meal with dirty, soiled clothing. Im kain lama perish Rashi lehepech. So why did Rashi describe in the opposite direction? Not to use the fancy chashav clothing that you use for avoda, but Rashi's focus was don't use your nice clothing to take out the garbage. The focus should have been don't use the clothing you use to take out the garbage to then come back and do the avoda. What's more important here? The focus should be don't serve Hashem, don't do your avoda in dirty clothing. Don't walk into shul with stains on your clothing. Instead, Rashi says, don't wear your nice clothing for taking out the garbage. We don't want it to get dirty. No. Don't wear dirty clothing to do the avoda. So Rashi seems to have the focus, the emphasis, the priority backwards. It seems like there's no problem if you wear your regular clothing and it got dirty, just you can't do the avoda in it. You got to send it to the dry cleaner. You got to clean it before your next round of avoda. So the real focus here is don't wear dirty clothing to do avoda, not don't wear your avoda clothing to take out the garbage. So Rashi got it backwards. It seems. Yesh Lomar says, Shmuel Berenbaum, the Rashi Kosav Kain Lalamed Chutz Me'achovas Derech Eretz Shel Shamis Rabban Begadim Shabisha Ben Kedera Yesh Od Limud Mikan Shu Tzorach L'Chabed is a big day avoda. Rashi was teaching us a secondary law, a second idea. Idea number one, don't wear dirty clothing to serve Hashem. So if you took out the garbage and you got a little garbage on that clothing, don't go to mincha in that. Change. We don't wear dirty clothing to daven, to serve Hashem. But there's a second idea, which is, if you have clothing that's designated for davening, don't wear it in a way that it's going to get dirty. Don't wear your davening jacket while you're taking out the garbage. Don't wear your Shabbos clothing during a weekday, because a person has to be mechabed. A person has to honor and elevate even their clothing, because the clothing is the person. It is a layer of identity, of expression of the person. And if it has a certain purpose, honor it and elevate it, and don't compromise it and don't lower it by being mevazeh it. And even if you're going to launder it and wash it and clean it later, so you'll say, well, let me just wear my Shabbos clothing even though I'm taking out the garbage. No. And if it gets stained, I'll send it to the dry cleaner. No. Protect it from even getting stained. That's a way to honor Shabbos, is by honoring your Shabbos clothing. And that's what he continues. He's a long essay here. We won't read it. But he continues, Parshas Achrei Mos, L'chabed is Big Day Kahuna. We have a special idea that we honor the Big Day Kahuna. But he goes on to say that the altar of Slobodka, we invoke Slobodka. The altar of Slobodka Hayanoig. Sha'achar Shabalu HaBig Day Shabbos Shalom. I've had this question. You have a suit that's designated for Shabbos. One of the ways we honor Shabbos is Shabbos clothing. Clothing for Shabbos. I have my weekday suits and I have my Shabbos suits. And I don't wear my Shabbos suits ever during the weekday. What happens when your Shabbos suit gets worn out? Can you now designate it a weekday suit? So the more expensive and the nicer suit should be designated for Shabbos, a Shabbos suit. But once it wears out, can you now use it for the week? So the altar of Slobodka would throw it out before he would use it for the weekday. Because he said if it was originally designated as a Shabbos suit, you're lowering your attitude towards Shabbos if you now use it during the weekday. Better to give it away. Better to throw it out. Because even though it may seem like a waste, it's inefficient. But nevertheless, it is not honoring Shabbos. And our goal and our mission is to honor Shabbos. And therefore, and you see that from here? But there's an idea that don't take out the garbage in your avoda suit, because if it's meluchlach, if it gets dirty, that is dishonoring. That's dishonoring it. All right, Perek Vav, Pasuk Vav. We're even turning the page. The fire on the mizbeach had to remain lit. The Kohen would light the fire, the wood, every morning. A permanent fire has to remain on the altar. It should never go out. A permanent fire has to remain on the altar. Says the holy Rebbe Nachman of Breslov. Allah Mizbeach, Ish Tamid. The holy fire has to be on the altar all the time. All the time. The fire can never go out. The fire of the neshama, the Mizbeach is the neshama. The fire can never go out. The fire of a Yid, you have to be on fire. Exuberant, enthusiastic, energized, excited. A Yiddishkeit that's on fire. Now sometimes the flame gets lowered. Sometimes the flame gets raised. Mishenechnas Av, mematen b'simcha. The month of Av, the destruction of two Batei Mikdash, we lower the flame. Mishenechnas Adar, marben b'simcha. The month of Adar, we elevate the flame. Flame is like a pilot light. Gets lowered, gets raised, but there has to always be a fire, a bren. A Yid, a Jew has to always be on fire. Says Rabbi Nachman. On the altar that was in the courtyard of the Mikdash, there was a perpetual fire that was always lit. But what do we do today? We don't have a Mizbeach. We don't have an altar. We don't have a Beis HaMikdash. We don't have a Mishkan. What do? Where do we maintain that fire? So first of all, we have what we call the Ner Tamid. In Shul, you have a Ner Tamid, a bulb, a fire that's always lit. And it doesn't matter. It's minyan, not minyan time. Shabbos Hagadol, Shabbos Shuvah, Drasha. Doesn't matter. Middle of the night, day, 365, 24 hours a day, you have a Ner Tamid. Our rabbi said, the Gemara Menachos, that's Tzadi Zayin. Our home is a Mikdash Ma'at. Bilvavi Mishkan Evna. Hashem wants each of us to build, our home should be a miniature temple. And the fixtures and furnishings, the utensils of our home should be modeled after the furnishings and the furniture of the Mishkan. So what in our home takes the place of the Mizbeach of the altar? The Shulchan. Our dining room table is our Mizbeach. If we eat, if our attitude and our philosophy of eating at our table is appropriate and correct and elevating, then it's like a Mizbeach. So Rabbi Nachman writes on Likutei Moharan Chelik Beis Siman Ein Zayin, every Jew is destined to have some tension, some friction, some challenge every day. And the greater a person is, the greater their mind, the more struggle they'll have. As the pasuk says in Koheles, "V'yosif das, yosif machov." The smarter, the brighter, the more sophisticated, the more advanced, the more thoughtful, the broader you are, the more worry, anxiety, challenge. And Rabbi Nachman writes, how do we overcome? How do we lessen that anxiousness, that worry, that struggle, that friction? By the correct attitude towards eating. Food. Chasidim say, Tarach l'fanei shulchan neged sorarai. David HaMelech said, I set the table before you in front of my adversaries. So what does that mean? What are my adversaries? Tarach l'fanei shulchan. In Kapitel Chav Gimel. David HaMelech, Psalm 23, Mizmor David, Hashem Lo Achzar. I set the table before you in full view of my adversaries. Ta'aroch lefanei shulchan, neged sorai. Who are my enemies? Sorai. You know who my enemies are? The challah, the dips, the sides, the mains, the desserts. These are each my enemies. Am I going to eat and overindulge and doubles and triples, and after I'm full, do I bring the right attitude, the right thoughtfulness, the right mindfulness to the food I'm eating? Am I eating the right food in the right time, in the right measure, in the right way, with the right bracha before and after? To eat holy, to eat in a holy way, is first of all to make sure what you're eating is proper. You should be eating it. And it means to eat with Yirah Shamayim. And to also recognize and realize, why am I eating? Eating gives me the energy to live. So I'm eating to live, I'm not living to eat. I'm eating to live, I'm not living to eat. And a person can't live, can't survive if they don't eat. So I'm actually making contact with life itself when I eat. And who provides life? Who's the source of all life and living? Hashem. So when I put food in my mouth, Hashem designed me to be a factory, to be able to extract the nutrients and nourishments and to purge the rest. I'm imbibing, I'm swallowing, I'm eating Hashem. He's the life force. He's giving me the life that's going to extend and give me life. That's the mindfulness when a person eats. And a person should know Hashem's at the table. I'm having a meal with Hashem. I'm never alone. You know, animals also eat. Does your eating resemble and look like and parallel an animal? Are you digging your face into the trough? Are you shoveling that food into your mouth? Or is your eating elevated and dignified and in the presence of Hashem and mindful and connecting to the source of all life? When a person eats with holiness and with the proper mindfulness and intent, so now, the flesh that's eaten, now the delicious roast and brisket and pulled beef and sliced steak that you're having, you're eating a korban on the mizbeach. You've just transformed your dining room table, your kitchen table, into an altar. And the meat and the food that you're eating off of it, you've elevated to be like a korban. Nebuch, we don't have mizbeach today. So how can we tap into this idea, Eisha mizbeach tu kadbo, that the fire has to always burn, it can never go out? Says Rabbi Nachman, we do have an altar. And the altar is our dining room table. It's our kitchen table. It's the restaurant table, wherever we find ourselves, whatever table. And we turn it into an altar when we eat properly and we eat with fire, with a mindfulness and a care and a core. What am I eating? How much am I eating? Am I full? Did I make a bracha? Is it the right intent? Am I connecting to Hashem? Am I seeing Hashem and the beauty in the food that I'm eating? Then we elevate it with a fire. We have a korban, we have a mizbeach, and we get closer to Hashem. Because when a person eats with mindfulness and presence, when they eat to live, they don't live to eat, they're creating the union of body and soul. They're creating a union of heaven and earth. They're creating a union of man and God. So a person should always remember and think while they're eating, I'm imbibing, I'm eating the source of life, the life source, which is God. Because after all, everything we're eating is coming from Hashem. It's all coming from Hashem. So that's all hinted to, says Rabbi Nachman. All that a person eats with holiness and sanctity and has in mind that they're doing it for the purpose of God, libo mislakeach b'kirbo b'dvekas b'Hashem. You've turned that table into a mizbeach, and you turned what looked like just a piece of meat. You've turned that into a korban that's yielding and bringing you closer to Hashem. Rav Oba also has a comment. Rav Oba writes in Alei Shor Chelik Beis. Rav Oba writes the following: Harotz l'skarev lashkocha el Yona lachios ima ulahavchin bat sarach lios min hatznuim. If a person wants to merit divine providence, divine connection, you want to feel Hashem's presence in your life, you want to feel Him interacting with you daily, then a person has to live the prerequisite to that. Who has that feeling? To whom does Hashem reveal Himself in that way? Hatznuim. Hatznuim. People who are modest. Ki hashkacha tzanuahi. Providence of Hashem is not explicit. It's not out in the open. It's not revealed for all to see. It's subtle. It's nuanced. It's tzanua. It's tzanua. And where do you see this, says Rav Oba? The Sefer HaChinuch writes in Mitzvah Kuf Lamed Beis, Lios Eisha al Mizbeach b'chol yom tamid. Our pasuk says a fire has to burn on the altar all day continuously. And the Sefer HaChinuch writes on that pasuk, Uba perish al tamid, lasim eitzim baboku ubein arbayim, b'biyar amuzah af apisha ish yord min hashamayim mitzvah lahavi min ahedyo. Where does the fire come from that consumes the karbanos on the Mizbeach? Sefer HaChinuch writes, it's a fire that descends from heaven and burns them up. So if the fire descends from heaven in a miraculous, supernatural, extraordinary way, why do you have to put a fire on the Mizbeach? Who are we fooling? Who are we faking? Why light the fire on the Mizbeach if in fact there's a fire descending from heaven? So Sefer HaChinuch writes there, Mishar Sheh Mitzvah, he writes an incredible yesod. I'll tell it to you outside. It's a beautiful piece by Rav Oba based on the Sefer HaChinuch Alei Shor Chelik Beis, page Tov Kuf Tzadi Daled. And he says the following. The Chinuch writes that even awesome miracles performed by Hashem are always somewhat concealed, and they can be explained as manifestation of nature. Even the splitting of the sea. You could describe and you could define the splitting of the sea happened. What does the pasuk say? Hashem moved the sea with a strong east wind all night. Why? Because even though it's unusual and unlikely, statistically, it has to at least be conceivable, plausible, that if the earth were rotating on its axis in a certain way, and the stars aligned in the constellations in a certain way, and the wind blew from a certain direction, a certain velocity, the sea could split. Why is it necessary to be able to explain it naturally? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't do revealed miracles. They always have to be able to be understood and described in a way in which his hand could be concealed. In a similar vein, despite the fact that a fire descended from heaven onto the Mizbeach, we're commanded to light our own fire on the Mizbeach in order to disguise that otherwise overt miracle. Even when Hashem reveals himself, he makes sure to hide behind the veil of nature. When the Navi tells us, the Navi Micha, walk humbly and modestly with God, he's not merely instructing us to conceal our good deeds. He's informing us that when a person conceals his actions, he's actually following in Hashem's footsteps. Hashem doesn't flex. Hashem doesn't flaunt. Hashem is not showing off for the world. It's always hidden and modest, and it's always able to be explained through some other means. And for us too, we shouldn't flex. We shouldn't show off. We should do our actions and even our virtues in a way which is modest and humble. Many people understand the concept that tznius, writes Rav Wolbe, very superficially. The modesty discussed by the Navi refers not here to sleeve lengths and skirt lengths and collarbone and men and what they look at, but rather to one's internal spiritual makeup. Hatznei Lechasim Lokecha, says Rav Wolbe, is not talking about only, certainly not limited to, superficially, rules of modesty. The Navi is talking about internally. The pasuk says, with modest one comes wisdom. Rabbeinu Yonah explains tznius is a virtue attributed to the wise, because they hear and listen, they do not desire to reveal what lies in their hearts. The capacity to hold back. You don't have to post and share and overshare everything in your life. You don't have to share and overshare. There's something called modesty. There's something that stays inside. There's something that you're able to hold back. There's something that's yet unrevealed. So the Sefer HaChinuch writes on this mitzvah, you have to keep the fire burning. It's a fire that comes from the heavens that consumes the carbon. So what's the point? Why bother lighting our own fire? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though he's doing a miracle that the fire is coming from heaven, doesn't want it to be a revealed miracle. It has to be explained. He wants it to be concealed. It should be plausible that it really was our fire, even though our fire is doing nothing. And that is a model for each and every one of us to live such a life that we're not showing off, we're not flaunting, we're not revealing. Not every moment has to be shared online. Not every thought, every feeling has to be written for the world to see. There's such a thing as that which is inside. Soloveitchik writes very similarly when it comes to the parochas, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the holy of holies of our lives. The parochas separated the holy of holies from the holy. He talks about growing up in a brisker home, his father. And this is a very extreme version, but Rav Soloveitchik describes and writes that his father never hugged him or kissed him. I don't know if his father said, I love you. It's a very extreme version. He said he never doubted for a moment his father's love, but emotions were not something that you express so readily, so openly. It was a different time, and that's for a different family, and we're not judging it or criticizing it, and we're also certainly not encouraging it or endorsing it. But the point he's making is that there's a Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's okay for us to have our own internal feelings and thoughts of the heart that don't go and aren't shared with anyone. It's okay, and I would argue it's necessary. You know what emotional intimacy is? If you tell everyone everything, what's left to share with your spouse? But if your spouse is that confidant in whom you invest and share things you don't tell anyone else in the world, that's what yields a sense of closeness, emotional intimacy. So the ability to share but not overshare, the ability to hold back, the ability to put up a curtain, a kodesh hakadoshim, a parochas, the ability to eish tamin tugal mizbeach lo zechbeh, the ability to throw people off and not flex, and to be able to explain in a way that's not obvious to all, that's something that Hashem is modeling and we follow and we emulate after. Perek Vav Pasuk Zayin. Now we go to Zos Toras HaMincha. This is the sacrifice of the Korban Mincha. What does the word Mincha mean literally? A Mincha is a gift. A mincha is a gift. Writes Rabbi Sachs, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, in his new Chumash. I don't know if it's available yet to the public. Mincha, the grain offering brought alongside all the other sacrifices, literally means gift or tribute. Sacrifice is not the same act across cultures. One must seek to understand the practice in terms of the distinctive beliefs of the culture in which it takes place. What then could sacrifice possibly mean in a religion in which God is the creator and owner of all? Why are we giving God gifts? He's the source of all existence. He owns everything in this world. Why are we giving him a gift? The simplest answer is this: we love what we are willing to make sacrifices for. Says Rabbi Sachs, we love what we're willing to make sacrifices for. The verb to live, ahav, aleph hey bov, aleph hey beis, is related to the verb have, all of which yahav have the sense of giving, bringing, or offering. That is why, when they were a nation of farmers and shepherds, the Israelites demonstrated their love of Hashem by bringing him a symbolic gift of their flock and herds, their grain and fruit, their livelihood. To love is to want to bring an offering to the beloved. To love is to give. This is true in many aspects of life. A happily married couple is constantly making sacrifices for one another. Parents make huge sacrifices for their children. People drawn to a calling often sacrifice remunerative careers for the sake of their ideals. In an age of patriotism, people make sacrifices for their country. In strong communities, people make sacrifices for one another when someone is in distress or needs help. Sacrifice is the super glue of relationship. It bonds us to one another. Sacrifice is the choreography of love. Isn't Rabbi Sachs amazing? What a tragedy and loss that we don't have him. But listen to his language, the way he describes it. A korban mincha, every korban is a mincha in some ways. Korban mincha in particular, why is a korban called a mincha, a gift, a sacrifice? Because it bonds us to one another. Sacrifice is the super glue of relationships. Sacrifice is the choreography of love. To love is to give. To love is to give. The answer is we love what we're willing to make sacrifices for. If someone's not willing to sacrifice for you when you need them, question whether they really love you. What does love mean? Love is not an adjective. Love is not an adjective. Love is a verb. Again, it's pre-Pesach. It's the home stretch. This is it. This is it. So, kids come home. I love you. Thank you for Pesach. Okay. You love me? Help me. Come to the kitchen. Take out the garbage. Step up. Sacrifice. And don't wait to be asked. Volunteer. In marriage and in life, love is sacrifice. We love what we sacrifice for. Let's do one Rabbi Soloveitchik to end. On V'chol Dam. You're not allowed to eat blood. The sacrifices, we disposed of the blood in a particular way. We don't eat blood. Says Rabbi Soloveitchik, Perek Zayin Pasuk Chavav. V'chol Dam lo sochlu b'chol mashvasechem lo v'l behema. Don't eat any blood in all of your dwelling places. Not only human life, but life in general is divine and helped by God. Absolutely. He's the only master who exercises unlimited dominion over life. Each life must be surrendered to Hashem. This is the only way of life shall be terminated. Destroying life because of selfish motivations is forbidden. This applies to man and animal alike. With respect to human sacrifice, the religious ethos experience interfered with the cult experience and converted the actual sacrifice to a mental one, expressed in submission and surrender. Animal sacrifice, however, was retained by the Torah. The sacred act of offering a life to Hashem is the only legitimate shedding of animal blood. Killing an animal for the sake of satisfying carnal desire, basar taiva, was classified as bloodshed and was therefore forbidden. Only after the people entered the land of Israel did the Torah make a concession and begin to tolerate the slaughtering of animals for non-sacred purposes. To this compromise, however, many conditions were attached that make the slaughtering of the animal and its consumption a most complicated process. By committing the slightest error, man may forfeit his privilege. In other words, the original design of the world was to be vegetarian or vegan. Animal sacrifice is a concession because we love flesh, we love barbecues, we love meat. Originally, the only meat that was permitted were the meat of sacrifice. The Torah, recognizing man craved and wanted more, made the concession to allow, when we slaughter properly, which is filled with incredible, intricate, minute, complicated detail, allows us to shecht and enjoy delicious flesh, delicious barbecue. But the one prohibition the Torah maintained to still remind us that life belongs to God, we shouldn't end human life or animal life, is the prohibition to drink blood. Even as the Torah came to terms with the lusty, sensual human being concerned with meat, it retained full possession and dominion over the blood. Blood is life, and as such, It can never become the object of man's desire or lust, hence the many prohibitions against blood consumption. Blood shall be sacrificed to God on his altar, never misused by man for satisfying his carnal drives. So the fact that we have to salt meat, the fact that we have to roast liver, the fact that we have to go to lengths to remove the blood from the meat, we're not allowed to eat blood, is a reminder that even as we benefit from the concession of allowing eating meat today, blood, which is life source, always forever remains to Hashem, and a person therefore cannot eat it. To remember, life is precious, not only human life, even animal life, all life. Hashem is the source of all life, and we rely on him. Wishing everyone a chag kosher v'sameach. Should be happy in a beautiful Pesach, a Pesach of miracles, Pesach of freedom. The hostages should come home. Our soldiers should be safe. Please remain to complete all of Sefer Tehillim. If everyone stays and we give out the booklets, it'll take just a few minutes in honor of our soldiers and the hostages.